Good morning, everyone. I hope this finds you well and living your very best life in Jesus Christ. I had an interesting give and take with someone on Messenger the other day that I'd like to share with you. This young man was raised in the church, but around age 17 or 18 he stopped going, which is unfortunately quite common these days. He's now in his 20s and has had a few run-ins with the law, as well as difficulty just plain keeping a job. He contacted me to ask me for help in finding a job, and as one thing led to another, we started talking about why he had so much trouble maintaining employment. During that conversation, he said this, "Mr. Miller, I guess what it boils down to is I'm just not good at following the rules." I asked him if he thought that this might be one of the reasons he left the church, and his response was, well, probably just too many rules to follow. I can identify with this man because I remember feeling the same way at one point in my life. I was raised in the Pentecostal church, and there certainly seemed to be a lot of rules, some written, many not. Most of the ones that were not written had to do with hair, clothes, and what I consider to be total non-essentials. And I admit I rebelled a bit on occasion. It got to me thinking about two things. How those two things, his leaving of the church and his difficulties in the world, and how they might be related. Let's face it, many people don't like rules, and many people early in their life paint themselves as rebels, rebelling against anything to their great detriment in life. Maturity comes when one realizes that rules are a necessary part of life, and that people who want to be successful, both in earthly matters and spirituality, need to follow the rules. Of course, some rules are harder to follow than others. We know that. And I'm reminded of the original rules. I'm reminded that when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, the Jewish people had a really hard time even following those 10 simple rules. You would think by the time Jesus and Paul's time, they would have had it mastered. But even during that time, they struggled to follow the first and simplest rule. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And the saddest part for me is that there are many people in the year 2021 that still can't seem to follow that one either. Let's face it, many people seem to worship anything but God, but mostly themselves. If you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 4 are aimed at maintaining our relationship with God by having no other gods, by creating no idols to worship, by not taking God's name in vain, and by remembering the Sabbath. We focus our hearts and minds not on earthly things, but godly things. This helps us to strengthen the bond between man and his Creator. But if you look further, though, the other 6 have to do with our relationships with each other. Honoring your parents, not murdering, not betraying the marriage bed, not stealing from others, not lying about your neighbor, not coveting their possessions. These things allow us to show that we're different from the world in a very, very real and tangible way. And what I find most interesting is that we can fulfill all of these commandments with one simple word: love. Love of the Father and love of others is what the rules are all about. By following the rule to love God and love one another, we're taking on a part of the very nature of God, because, after all, God is love. In Romans 13, 8 through 10, Paul tells us, "Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law." The commandments, "You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet," and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. I sincerely pray that this young man will cease his rebellious ways and remember the lessons of his youth. He's very intelligent and a very capable person and could do amazing things for the Lord. But until he stops loving himself more than others, and frankly more than God, I'm afraid his trouble will just continue to increase. For this is truly the root of his problems, and not just him. As we go through today, let us remember that love is a revolutionary thing. It was back in Jesus' time, and it still is. If we must rebel, let us rebel against the world and all its false idols and, frankly, self-worship. We are called to love freely, wholeheartedly, unselfishly, like the Lord does. Let's put that love into action every day of our lives. I mean, if we're going to be rebels, let us be rebels, fine. But let us be rebels for Jesus Christ and His love. I hope you make today a terrific day. I want you to know that I'm here if you need me. And I love you all.